Drinking alcohol, smoking, and drug use are harmful to health.
When I was 20, scraping by in college on student loans and a brutal night shift at a diner off Highway 42, I learned what it meant to fear something you couldn't explain. The diner, a greasy spoon called Mabel's, sat like a forgotten relic at the edge of town, its neon sign flickering like it was on its last legs. I worked the graveyard shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., serving truckers, insomniacs, and the occasional drifter who looked like they'd seen too much of the world. The hours were punishing, and by the time my shift ended, I'd be so exhausted I'd drive home half asleep, the world blurring into streaks of dawn light and asphalt. My route home took me past Fairview Road, a narrow, cracked stretch of pavement that veered off the highway and disappeared into a dense thicket of pine and oak. It wasn't a road anyone used unless they had to. The locals avoided it, and even the truckers who knew every back road in the county wouldn't touch it. At the end of Fairview, hidden deep in the woods, stood an abandoned farmhouse. 2 stories tall, its clapboard siding was weathered to a sickly gray. The windows boarded up with splintered plywood, and the roof sagged inward like a rotting ribcage. It was the kind of place that looked like it was waiting for something, or someone. The stories about the house were the kind you'd hear whispered over coffee at the diner, or muttered by kids trying to spook each other at the gas station. Decades ago, they said, a man named Harold Grayson had lived there with his wife Eleanor and their 2 children, a boy and a girl. One night, something snapped in Harold. He murdered his family, his wife with a kitchen knife, his kids with a shotgun, before turning the barrel on himself. The details were murky, the kind of thing that got embellished with every retelling, but the core of it never changed. The Grayson family was gone, and the house had been empty ever since. No one wanted to buy the property. Developers who came sniffing around backed out after one look at the place. Kids, though, were drawn to it like moths to a flame. They'd dare each other to sneak out to Fairview at night, to tag the walls with spray paint or steal a board from the porch as proof of their bravery. The exterior of the house was a canvas of teenage rebellion, pentagrams, crude curses, half-finished names, scrawled in neon colors. But there was one mark that stood out, a bloody handprint smeared on the front door. It was the kind of thing that should have washed away in the rain, but no matter how many storms rolled through, it stayed. Bright, wet, like it had just been pressed there. I'd heard all the stories, but I didn't put much stock in them. I was a skeptic by nature, raised by a father who thought ghost stories were for suckers, and a mother who'd rather pray than speculate. Besides, I had enough real problems: tuition bills, a car that coughed like it was dying, and a boss who thought Employee of the Month was a personality trait. The house at the edge of Fairview was just a creepy landmark on my drive home, nothing more. That is, until the night it wasn't. It was late October, the air sharp with the promise of winter, when I saw something that changed everything. My shift at Mabel's had been hell. 2 waitresses called out sick, leaving me to handle a rush of truckers and a drunk who'd spilled coffee on my shoes. By the time I clocked out at 5:45 a.m., I was bone-tired, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. The sky was still dark, the horizon just starting to bruise with purple. I was halfway down Highway 42, my old Honda rattling along, when I glanced toward Fairview Road and saw it, a dim orange glow flickering through the trees. It wasn't headlights. It wasn't a lantern or a campfire. It was firelight, soft and unsteady, spilling through the gaps in the farmhouse's boarded windows. I slowed my car, squinting into the darkness. The glow pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, and for a moment, I thought it might be kids messing around. Maybe they'd lit a fire in the yard to spook each other. But something about it felt wrong. The light was too contained, too deliberate, like it was coming from inside the house. I should have kept driving. Every instinct screamed at me to floor it, to get home and collapse into bed. But curiosity, that stupid, reckless impulse, tugged at me. I'd driven past that house 100 times, heard the stories, dismissed them. Now, faced with something real, something tangible, I wanted to know. I wanted to prove to myself it was nothing, just kids or squatters or my own exhaustion playing tricks. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, my tires crunching against the frost-covered ground. The air was cold when I stepped out, biting through my thin diner uniform. I grabbed my flashlight from the glove box, a cheap thing that flickered if you shook it too hard, and started cutting through the brush toward the house. The woods were quiet, unnaturally so. No crickets, no owls, just the sound of my own breathing and the crunch of leaves underfoot. The closer I got to the property, the heavier the air felt. It wasn't just the cold. It was like the atmosphere itself had weight, thick with the smell of copper and mildew, like blood left to rot in a damp cellar. The farmhouse loomed ahead, its silhouette jagged against the pre-dawn sky. The graffiti-covered walls seemed to shift in the shadows, the spray paint twisting into shapes that didn't make sense. Spirals, eyes, words that weren't words. The bloody handprint on the door gleamed wetly, as if someone had pressed their palm against it moments ago. I hesitated, my flashlight beam trembling as it swept across the porch. The boards were warped, some missing entirely, and the front door hung slightly ajar, a sliver of that orange glow spilling out. Then I heard it. Not voices exactly, more like a low, rhythmic murmuring, like a crowd chanting in unison. It was faint, almost swallowed by the silence of the woods, but it was there, coming from inside the house. The sound sent a chill down my spine, not because it was loud, but because it was so deliberate, so focused. I stepped onto the porch, the wood groaning under my weight, and the murmuring stopped. Just like that. The silence that followed was worse, absolute, suffocating, like the house was holding its breath. I should have turned back. I knew it then, just as I know it now. But something pulled me forward, some stupid mix of adrenaline and defiance. I pushed the door open, wincing as the hinges screamed, and stepped inside. The air in the house was colder than outside, cold enough to make my breath fog in front of me. The smell hit me harder now. Copper, mildew, and something sweeter, like rotting fruit. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a foyer cluttered with debris. Broken furniture, shattered glass, and what looked like old clothes strewn across the floor. The walls were a mess of peeling wallpaper and graffiti, some of it fresh, some faded to illegibility. I swept the beam around, trying to make sense of the space, and that's when I saw the source of the glow. In the living room just beyond the foyer, a fire burned in the fireplace. It wasn't a big fire, but it was steady, casting flickering shadows across the room. What made my stomach lurch wasn't the flames themselves, it was what was fueling them. The fireplace was stuffed with children's toys. Dolls with melted faces, plastic trucks warped by the heat, stuffed animals with singed fur, all piled together, their synthetic materials bubbling and popping as the fire consumed them. The smell of burning plastic mixed with the other odors, making my eyes water. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. Who would do this? Kids? Squatters? It didn't make sense. The toys weren't just tossed in, they were arranged, stacked deliberately, like some kind of offering. I took a step closer, my flashlight shaking in my hand, and that's when I heard it. Footsteps. slow, heavy, deliberate, coming from upstairs. My heart slammed against my ribs. I swung the flashlight toward the staircase at the far end of the room. The steps were old, splintered, disappearing into the darkness of the second floor. The footsteps continued, each one creaking against the rotting wood, unhurried, as if whoever, or whatever, was up there knew I was listening. I strained my ears, trying to pick out any other sounds, but there was nothing else. Just those steps, methodical, like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. I should have run. Every nerve in my body screamed it. But I didn't. Instead, I moved toward the staircase, drawn by some morbid need to understand what was happening. The firelight cast my shadow across the walls, distorted and twitching, and as I passed by the graffiti, I noticed something new. Among the spray-painted tags and symbols, there was a patch of wall where the paint looked different. Red, wet, still dripping. It wasn't paint, it was blood, smeared in jagged streaks, forming words I couldn't quite read in the dim light. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw the letters shift, like they were trying to spell something else. I reached the base of the stairs and hesitated. The footsteps had stopped, but the silence was worse, heavy with anticipation. I put one foot on the first step, testing it. The wood groaned, but held. I took another step, then another, moving slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness above. Halfway up, I heard it again. Not footsteps this time, but something softer, quicker. Small footsteps, like children running through the hallways upstairs. And then, faintly, laughter. High-pitched, giggling, but wrong. Distorted, like it was coming through a broken radio, edged with a wet, guttural snarl. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The laughter circled me, echoing from different directions, as if the children were running around me, through the walls, under the floor. I swung my flashlight wildly, but there was nothing, just the empty staircase and the peeling wallpaper. Then, from the top of the stairs, a new sound, a low, wheezing hiss, like air escaping a punctured tire. I looked up, and there he was. A man stood at the top of the stairs, tall and gaunt, his frame so thin it looked like his bones might tear through his skin. His face was wrong, too tight, like a mask stretched over a skull that didn't fit. His eyes were hollow sockets, black pits that seemed to drink in the light, but I swear he was looking at me. His mouth opened, and that wheezing hiss filled the air, growing louder, more insistent. It wasn't just a sound, it was a presence, pressing against my eardrums, my chest, my skull. I stumbled back, nearly losing my footing on the stairs. The laughter started again, louder now, coming from all around me. Tiny shapes moved in the shadows, flickers of motion, too quick to track. Pale hands reached out from under broken furniture, from behind torn wallpaper, their fingers small but sharp, clawing at my ankles, tugging at my pant legs. I kicked out, my flashlight dropping to the floor with a clatter. The beam spun wildly, illuminating flashes of the room. A doll's head rolling across the floor, its eyes melted shut. A child's shoe, caked in something dark. And the man, now descending the stairs, one slow step at a time, his hollow eyes never leaving me. I scrambled backward, my hands scraping against the rough wood of the stairs. The front door was my only thought. Get out, get out, get out. But when I reached it, it was shut tight, the handle cold and unyielding under my fingers. I pulled, pushed, kicked, but it wouldn't budge. The laughter grew louder, closer, the tiny hands more insistent, scratching now, drawing blood. I could feel them, cold and slick, wrapping around my wrists, my ankles, trying to drag me back into the house. The man was at the bottom of the stairs now, inches from me. His skin seemed to peel in strips, curling back to reveal raw, twitching muscle underneath. His mouth opened wider, and this time I heard voices, not one, but dozens, overlapping, screaming, whispering, sobbing. Men, women, children, all saying the same word: stay. The word hit me like a physical force, a command that burrowed into my brain. My vision blurred, my legs buckled, and for a moment, I felt myself slipping, like I was falling into those voices, into the house itself. The hands tightened, pulling harder, and I could feel the cold seeping into my bones, the weight of the house pressing down on me. Then, a sound, like a gunshot, or maybe just the door finally giving way. It burst open, the hinges screaming, and I stumbled out onto the porch, gasping for air. The hands let go, the laughter cut off, and I ran. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get the key in the ignition. When I finally did, I floored it, the tires screeching as I peeled onto the highway. When I dared to glance in the rearview mirror, the house was dark again. No firelight, no movement, just a silent, broken shape against the tree line. I drove straight to my apartment, locked the door, and sat on the couch, staring at the wall until the sun came up. I didn't sleep that day, or the next. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those hollow sockets, heard that word, stay. I never took Fairview Road again. I started taking a longer route home, adding 20 minutes to my drive just to avoid it. I didn't tell anyone what happened, not at first. I was too afraid they'd think I was crazy, or worse, that they'd believe me. A few months later, I was working another late shift when one of the regulars, an old trucker named Carl, who always ordered black coffee and a slice of pie, noticed I was jumpier than usual. I don't know why I told him. Maybe I just needed to get it out. But I spilled the whole story. The fire, the toys, the man, the voices. His face went pale, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. "Kid," he said, his voice low, "that house doesn't have a staircase anymore. Floor collapsed 10 years ago. You couldn't have gone upstairs." I stared at him, my stomach twisting. "What?" "Place was gutted after the murders," he said. "Cops tore it apart looking for evidence. The second floor is just a shell. Nothing but beams and insulation. No stairs, no rooms, nothing." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to argue, to tell him I knew what I'd seen, but the certainty in his voice shook me. I finished my shift in a daze, and when I got home, I started digging. I looked up everything I could find about the Grayson house. Old newspaper articles, police reports, even a grainy photo from the 80s showing the aftermath of the murders. Carl was right. The staircase had been destroyed when the second floor caved in during a botched investigation. The house was barely standing, held together by rotting beams and stubborn neglect. But I'd been there. I'd climbed those stairs. I'd seen the man, felt the hands, heard the voices, and the blood on the walls. It had been fresh, still dripping. None of it made sense, and the more I tried to rationalize it, the worse it got. I moved away after college, got a job in a different state, tried to put it behind me. But the house never left me. I'd dream about it. Those hollow eyes, the burning toys, the word stay echoing in my skull. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I could hear those small footsteps circling my bed, those tiny hands brushing against my sheets. Last week I got a letter. No return address, no signature, Just a single sheet of paper with 3 words scrawled in red ink. You didn't stay. I burned it in my sink, but the smell of smoke brought it all back. The copper, the mildew, the melting plastic. I don't know what I walked into that night on Fairview Road, but I know it wasn't just a house. It was something else, something alive, something that wanted me and didn't let go. And sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I feel it. That pull, that weight, those voices whispering, begging, demanding. I'm terrified that one day I'll listen.